Welcome back to the Healing Wellness Show, the place where we dig into practical evidence awareness strategies to help you feel and function better, whether it's body or mind. I'm your host, Dr. Karim, and if you're new here, let's make sure you follow, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. But today, we're actually going to be exploring something called neurofeedback. It's a technology assisted to train your brain's activity with applications for like focus, stress, sleep, and even chronic pain. So to guide us today, I'm joined by Dr. Chris. He's from Exceptional Life Center, where neurofeedback is a core service in their clinic. Dr. Chris helps patients translate complex brain data into simple, actionable training plans. So by the end of this, you'll understand what a session feels like, who's a good candidate, the kind of results that people can reasonably expect, and how neurofeedback fits alongside lifestyle and integrative care. Dr. Chris, welcome to the show. For those that don't know Dr. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today, Doc. I greatly appreciate it. So I'm Dr. Steiner. I'm a chiropractor. I'm board certified in integrative medicine. And in my practice, the Exceptional Life Center, we focus on functional medicine and functional neurology. So we help people with all sorts of health issues, from reversing type 2 diabetes to people with some hormone dysregulation, also helping people with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, concussion injuries, strokes, seizures, and a lot of ADHD too as well. I was one of the very first patients when we started doing the neurofeedback, because when I was a kid, I was a big time ADD kid, and thank God my parents never put me on medication. And here we are, changing people's lives, 26 plus years in practice and helping everybody get their lives back.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So to the viewers, to the listeners, if you were to explain what neurofeedback is, let's say you're going to explain it to a 10-year-old. How would you describe that? And tell us about like what's happening with the brain on the screen.
Perfect. Yeah. This is the way I keep it as simple as possible. Neurofeedback is brainwave entrainment therapy. So you're retraining the brain waves to be back into normal conditions, normal areas. I want you to remember Goldilocks and the Three Bears. The porridge was too hot, too cold, and then just right. Well, the same thing with our brain waves. What we're going to do is what's called a quantitative EEG, where we put an EEG cap on the patient's head, and we literally measure the electrical output created by their brain. And a pretty cool fact is your brain makes enough electricity to turn on a 30-watt light bulb. So it's a pretty powerful organ that we have, and a very electrical output organ. So we get that working better with the quantitative EEG. We measure it, and that's going to give us a nice little printout to tell us if the brain is going too fast, too slow, or just right. So back to the correlation to Goldilocks and the Three Bears. If the brain's going too fast, we want to slow it down a little bit. If it's going too slow, we need to speed it up a little bit. And there's four main brain waves that we look at: delta, theta, alpha, and beta. And they all have different functions, and we'll go into that in just a few moments. But that's the main thing, is to train the brain to be as balanced and as stable as possible. And when we're able to do that, of course, the body's going to function better, the brain's functioning better. And we all know the brain is the master controller for every cell in our body. So it's pretty important to have the brain optimized.
So let's go back to, you keep mentioning EEG. I mean, obviously, I know what that is. We do use it in our clinic. But for the listeners, the audience, why don't you explain a little bit how you do that? Do you refer, because, some people will say, oh, I'm going to get an EEG, I have to go to a hospital and get that. And that's really not the case. But why don't you explain a little bit about EEG and how you do that?
Yeah, perfect. We do it right here in the office. Like I said, we have a cap, an EEG cap. We just apply to the patient's head, put a little gel in there. So we have a little conductive gel so we can get a good, clean reading. Because again, we're literally measuring the electrical output created by the brain. So we measure that output, and then we get what's called the brain map. That's the actual report that tells us how the delta waves are doing, how the theta waves are doing, how the beta, etc. And also the connectivity between each side of the brain and how they're functioning. So we make sure not one side is more dominant than the other, and we make sure the brain is functioning at its optimal level.
So, moving into, you keep mentioning, the delta, the theta. Once you start explaining some of these and the different areas and what they do, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. The delta wave is one of our smallest brain waves. anywhere between 2 to 4 hertz, depending on which literature you read. And it focuses a lot with sleep. So people who don't sleep very well, insomniacs, their delta wave typically is raising very, very high. So it's very high and it's running very, very strong. So the analogy I like to use when we go over this with the patient is, imagine a stick shift car. If you're driving down the highway in first gear in a stick shift car, trying to do 70 miles an hour, that's not good for your transmission. It's going to blow the engine and the transmission. And that's why people can't get the results they're looking for until they start doing the brainwave entrainment therapy or the neurofeedback. And it's a pretty powerful tool because, as you know, Doc, if you're not sleeping, you're not healing. So people who can't get proper sleep are not healing good enough to be healthy. And that's why so many people then start self-medicating themselves. They start doing drugs. They start drinking lots of alcohol. And that just creates a lot of other litany of other health issues down the road that are not ideal for our patient's well-being. So that's the delta wave. Then we got theta. Theta is a little bit bigger wave, and it deals a lot with focus and attention. So when people are not focusing right, sometimes the theta is too high or too low. Typically, it could be either or, especially with ADD. There's 7 different types of ADD, according to Dr. Amen. So we want to make sure we get the appropriate balance, again, of all these things. And then there's alpha. Alpha deals with emotions for the most part, and people who have some anxiety, depression could be actually spiked up and also crashed down low too, where we see a lot of what's bluing on the brain map. And then beta is what I consider to be the most important brainwave. It deals with executive functions, the capability to thought, plan, do cognitive work. So especially when I'm dealing with people with Alzheimer's, dementia, and neurodegenerative diseases, we really focus on beta to make sure how it's functioning, because it's also the broadest spectrum of the frequency. It goes anywhere from 16 to 32 hertz, and it's critically important that that is very balanced, because the other ones only go up to about 15 hertz combined. So that's a pretty broad spectrum that we have there on the frequency scale. And it's just a great way to get that training. Usually when we get the beta, cancel that. When we get the beta waves working optimally, a lot of things fall into line and the patient really excels.
That's, that's a lot of detail and information that, and that's why we have doctors just like you that will do the brain maps, read them, go over them with the patients. And yeah, a lot of times we have to dumb it down because it does get complex. And in order for our patients to understand, that's what we need to do sometimes as well. But why don't you tell us what would be some typical side effects that you or a patient might encounter?
The beautiful thing is, according to the FDA, there's been no side effects reported in over 50 years of clinical use. So it's wonderful. And the reason why there's no side effects is nothing is physically going into the patient's body. The patient's own body is controlling the whole process. We're doing EEG-driven neurofeedback. That is the actual therapy that we do. So what that means is typically we would have leads on the forehead, dealing with the frontal lobe, and we can put them in other lobes as well. Let's deal with the forehead for right now, the frontal lobe. And when we put the leads here, that's reading the patient's brainwave patterns as they're watching a TV show on the computer. And all the computer is doing is measuring, doing an EEG at that time. So it's literally measuring your brainwave patterns. And when your brainwaves go a little high or a little low and out of that optimal range that we're looking for, the TV show flickers and flutters. So the patient then subconsciously, through what's called operant condition, has their brains retrained. Now, I'm originally from New York, so I'm really going to sound like a New Yorker here. If I'm watching the TV show and my brain waves are going out of range and the TV starts flickering, my brain subconsciously goes, oh, well, I'm watching this here, and wants to train itself to get back into the normal ranges again, just like we said with Goldilocks. We don't want it too high, too hot, or too low, too cold. We want it just right and keep that optimal functioning range for those brain waves. And the beautiful thing is the computer does all the work. So nothing literally gets put into the patient's body. That's why there's no side effects. And then there's been a study going on since, I believe, 1977. Don't hold me to that year. And they say that once you get to a certain level of healing, the results are pretty much permanent. Now, I can't say anything is permanent except for death and taxes. But the bottom line is, if something lasts and gets positive results in your nervous system for 20, 30, 40 years, that's pretty impressive.
So how would you define success for a patient or, for you? How would you define success when doing neurofeedback?
Basically, the patient's get such great gains. Let's just take an ADD child right now. Instead of having them being taken these medications that for the most part are just methamphetamines and they're just crashing the person's brain, they're now able to focus. They're paying more attention at school. They don't have the side effects, all the stuff. How long is it going to take? Everybody's completely different. Some people need 20 sessions. Some people need more. And there's other factors that go with it as well. We got to change nutrition a lot of the times. But when people start having more energy, more cognition, I have a patient right now. He's probably about stage 3, stage 4 Alzheimer's, and I almost didn't accept her for care, but her family members were patients as well. Like, please help out grandma. And we did. And she's doing great. 1 month in, they're like, holy mackerel. She's walking more upright. She's not sloshing her feet on the ground. Now we're doing other therapies as well to help with that too. But the bottom line is her cognition is back. She knows where she is. She knows who she's talking to. And not that she was so far gone that she couldn't do, but it's so much clearer in her brain when she's able to communicate with people. I got a story. This is one of my favorite patients of all time. Actually, I got a couple of them real quick, if that's okay, Doc.
Yeah.
All right. So I had a gentleman come to see me. This is probably about 10 years ago. And when he was 19 years old, and he was 32 years old when he came to see me, he had a good portion of his brain removed. They did a lobectomy. Okay.
Oh.
Because he was having seizures. And I thought that was a pretty aggressive thing. But, they did that when he was 19. So he was living with mom and dad. He was now 32 when he became my patient. And we did our whole neurological evaluation. We did the quantitative EEG, the brain map, and we started doing therapy with him. And when he first came in, though, say hello to me. I'm going to tell you how his response time was. Say hello to me, Doc.
Hello.
So he had a
That's a
major
long time.
communication lag. So he couldn't do that. His hands were also all contractured, and his leg was in a splint because he had drop foot. Because he was basically almost like he had a stroke and was paralyzed on this side of his body. Not quite paralyzed, but he had some issues going on there. So as we started doing the therapy, his communication came back. He was able to talk. He was able to get use of his hands. So literally when he finished care, he took a pottery class and made myself and all my staff coffee mugs, which was the greatest thing because he got use of his hands back. And you know what the best part is? The way he makes a living now, he's an artist making all clay artwork and all this other fun stuff with his hands that he couldn't do. And now he's traveling the world and living an exceptional life. So it just makes me so happy that you give people the value of their life back. It's just amazing. And it's just so much fun and to come to work every day and help people get an exceptional life. There was this other young lady, who I'll never forget. She was a 16-year-old girl, and she was having 20 to 25 seizures a day. And we're talking about grand mal seizures. All the neurologists said there's nothing that can be done. They just want to put on tons of drugs. The family actually moved for 3 months from Arkansas so they could come to my practice. And we worked with her. She hasn't had a seizure in 8 years. That is the power of your brain. That is the power of getting the nervous system turned back on. Listen, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but the body and the man upstairs, God, whoever you want to believe in, I believe in God, created the body to be able to heal itself as long as you do the appropriate stimulation and get the body functioning in the right way. So the body just works amazing. So it was a pretty cool tool we have here, this human body.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So who would be a candidate for this?
Pretty much almost anybody. My practice mostly focuses on people who suffer with brain fog. What is brain fog? You start losing focus, attention, and concentration, right? You start having balance disorders. I deal with a lot of people who are early stages of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Like I said, even kids with ADHD. Myself, I'll never forget taking the SATs in high school. In New York, we played football on Saturday afternoons, and I'm taking the SAT. And I'm like, nope, I care about football. I care more about football. I just do B on the SAT because me and school did not get along. I wish I had neurofeedback when I was 15 years old, opposed to when I didn't do it till I was about 35. And now I'm in my mid-50s, and it would have saved me such a heartache because school and me did not go along. The only reason why I became a doctor was I was too darn stubborn to quit. And actually, my gift was able to understand the nervous system and how the body functioned without knowing all the technical stuff. So that was a God-given gift to me, so I'm grateful for that. People who could benefit from neurofeedback and neurostimulation is pretty much anybody who wants to optimize themselves. A lot of professional athletes. If you watch that TV show called Quarterback, you saw some of the quarterbacks were doing neurofeedback to keep their brain optimized. The Italian World Cup soccer team uses neurofeedback. There's many professional athletes. I've had patients who are just very high achievers, high-level executives who go, Chris, I'm not as sharp as I was 10 years ago. Can I get working better? I go, of course we can. And boom, they're sharper and sharper, and they're able to focus and be able to get more things accomplished without any side effects. That is what I love the most. As you can tell, this gets me charged up, just helping people live an exceptional life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, have you ever had any like red flag cases where maybe you have to refer out?
Oh, of course. Plenty of times. Yeah.
What kind of cases?
I mean, sometimes people are too far gone with, when I deal with these dementia cases. And because I'm not going to accept somebody unless I believe I could help them. It's really that simple. Our first responsibility is to A, do no harm, B, don't exceed the patient's metabolic capacity. That means don't overdo it, especially when we're dealing with the nervous system. It is very easy to overstimulate somebody. So having a trained professional who knows what they're doing and lots of years of experience. I've been doing this for 26 years, and being able to help people get their lives back is critically important. So some people, need other resources as well. Now, does that mean that we can't help them? We can, but my philosophy is real simple. If I'm only going to help you this much, and if I send you to another doctor who's going to help you this much, I'd much rather have that patient get as much benefit as possible. And then a lot of times people come back. Let's take another example. People with anxiety and depression. Sometimes very difficult to help with, but sometimes not. And I tell people all the time, if your anxiety is a neurologically based issue, then I might be the best person on the planet to help you. If it's simply an emotional issue, I might not be able to get the benefit that you're looking for. And that is where psychologists and other people come on in and be able to help that patient get the gains and get their lives working better. But I can't tell you how many patients with anxiety and depression who've seen psychologists for 30 years, and psychiatrists for 30 years, and they said nothing helps and nothing works. And then we start getting their brain and nervous system turned back on, getting it activated. And then all of a sudden they go, man, my therapist is the smartest person on the planet. And I'm quite sure that therapist has been saying the same thing for the last 20, 30 years to them, but now they're able to actually understand it and have cognition on it and really get their body and get their health back in order.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what other modalities would you use with neurofeedback?
Unlimited. I mean, in my practice, I have lasers. I have what's called pulse electromagnetic field. I have Hacomet. I have special other machines to activate the nerves. In my practice, I fully focus on stimulating, activating the nerves, getting the body turned back on. Unfortunately, medications, for the most part, stop a part of the body's systems from working. You take gabapentin or Lyrica for people with neuropathy, that's really an anti-seizure medication, and it's designed to stop the brain from functioning. Well, my viewpoint is we need to make sure the brain functions at its highest level. That's the key ingredient. Get the body functioning the best it possibly can. So now some of these people in their 80s, I got a lot of people in their 88 years old in my practice, and they're dancing out here. It's so much fun. And I also got teenagers. The bottom line is the people who are 88 years old, they're not going to be able to run and jump like when they were 20, but they're still able to be sharp as tack and still be able to function and live an exceptional life and love being with their family and friends. And it's a lot of fun.
So how is neurofeedback different from like meditation apps or like brain games or stimulants, or how might they complement each other?
They can. So medications, there are certain medications like benzos that we don't want to be doing too much neurofeedback with the patient, or we got to have their doctor control their medication because you can get some side effects due to the medication, not due to the neurofeedback. And as we said before, it's all about what is the best situation for the patient. We always have to protect the patient and optimize the patient. But the question again was, what kind of things would you not want to do, correct?
Yeah, don't want to do or could complement with it.
Oh, that could complement?
Yeah, so some examples would be like meditation apps, or, some people will say brain games or stimulants or.
Perfect. Yeah. So some brain games are really good. Some of them, in my opinion, are kind of useless, but if they keep the person happy, it's okay. Neurofeedback is a great tool because it's specific. Where you do a brain game on an app, it's not specifically stimulating what you're trying to do. That is why we do specific diagnostic testing. We do the neurological exam and the quantitative EEG, the brain map, to find out exactly which lobes are being affected, how they're being affected. Are they too high, too low? And then we're able to actually stimulate the body in that specific way to get that brain turned back on and function at its highest level, where certain apps, you just can't do that. Even apps that are really, really good, like optokinetic tape apps, I personally would never let a patient do that, in my humble opinion, just because I've seen people, you got to be very careful with OPK, optokinetic taping. So it's just one thing I always decide to err on the side of caution with folks.
So how do you set realistic expectations with your patients?
Well, that's how it all happens during the consultation. And I spend my initial consultation is about an hour long. It includes a complete neurological evaluation. And from there, we decide if we could proceed. And then we do the quantitative EEG. And then we have them come back and then go over the results. And we find out what truly can we help this patient with? Because, you never want to look at the blinky light, right? You go to a cardiologist, they just care about your cardiovascular system. You go to a neurologist, they're looking at the nerves, they're looking for tumors, they're looking for brain bleeds and stuff like that. They're great at diagnosing things, but they're not really the most advanced at helping people. And I used to have neurologists work for me. So when I'm looking at a patient, we want to make sure what is the best course of action for that patient to get the optimal gains in their life. And can we help them? Managing the expectations is real simple. If someone, had half their brain surgery removed, like my buddy Zach did, I have to be, hey, we're going to find out what's going to happen. We know neuroplasticity works. We know neurogenesis works. We have to find out how much can we really get from the other side of the brain to really work. Luckily enough, in his case, we were able to get tremendous gains for him. So it far exceeded his expectations. And we just want to make sure we're honest with patients. That's the number one thing. I never tell somebody, yeah, you're going to be 20 years old again. No, but that's a lie. And I'm not going to lie to a patient about what's happening. And I tell people, if someone goes, well, right now it's on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 9 and I'm miserable. And they go, I want to be perfect. I got to be honest with them. No, if we get this down to a 4 or a 3, we're going to be jumping for joy. And most patients are like, okay, that makes sense to me, doc, because I've had this problem for 20, 30 years and we're really going to get things working better.
So let's take a deep step into you. Why did you choose to get into neurofeedback? Why is it that you're so passionate about it?
It's one of my favorite tools of all time. Like when I retire or if I ever sell my practice, I'm keeping a pulse electromagnetic field machine for myself, and I'm also keeping a neurofeedback machine for myself. It is so powerful. And for me, it seems so simple of a therapy to help a patient get such drastic and incredible changes. How I got into it originally was almost by accident. It was funny how the world works and the universe works. One day I was in my office and I got a call from the local middle school where my daughter was attending. And they said, okay, there's been a problem and something's going on. And I said, okay, well, what's happening? Well, we can't talk to you about it, but your daughter is fine. So then why are you calling me? And they kept on saying, we can't talk about it, can't talk about it. So I said, oh my God, a kid tried to commit suicide, didn't they? And you could tell on the end of the phone, there was a big pause and they didn't know how to respond to it. And they said, we can't talk about what happened, but you need to talk to your daughter. Well, what do I need to talk to my daughter about? I figured that was the situation. So, of course, I called my other daughter and said, where's daughter number 2? And she goes, she's in the kitchen. I said, good. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Do not let her out of your sight. Because I didn't know what was going on. If she was having issues because she didn't present it. I got home, talked to her. She's like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what you're talking about. Luckily, my daughter is totally fine. It wound up that there was another child who did try to commit suicide, luckily was not successful. But that weekend, I was actually going off to a conference. And in my career, I'm always trying to find ways to help patients get better because not everybody fits into the same box. And people, unfortunately, are sicker and sicker. So we as practitioners have to widen our toolbox, always be learning to really get people better. So it was just so funny. I was at the conference and one of my dear friends, Dr. Andy Barlow, was talking about neurofeedback, a new device that he just found out about. And we had a nice powwow about 10, 15 other doctors. And it was after the conference, one of the other doctors had a machine and we were talking about it. So I bought one on the spot. And then I started doing all the training for it and learning about how to do it. I'm like, this is so amazing. And we were able to get such great results that, now I have several of these machines and we're able to help people get their lives back. And like I said, my passion comes from how effective it is and basically also how easy it is on the patient. I love things that aren't going to harm a patient.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great story there. So why don't you walk us through a visit with a patient from day one till you're doing a re-exam on 'em? Kind of
Perfect.
walk us through what that process looks like.
Yep. Typical day one, I give patients a whole bunch of paperwork to fill out before they come on in. That saves us a lot of time. And I book a good amount of time for my people because I want to be able to make sure I'm focused solely on them. And I hate when doctors go, I literally went to the doctor the other day just to get a checkup. I was there for literally 20 seconds with the doctor. He didn't even enter the room. It was pathetic. But I don't do that. We deal with people with complex neurological conditions. So they come in, we talk, we do our consultation, we find out what is particularly bothering them, why they came in, how it's affecting their lives negatively. And then we start with our examination. And we start with what I think is a pretty simple neurological evaluation. We check sensory nerve input, we check balance, we check cerebellar function, we check all the different areas of the brain, the different lobes of the brain. From there, we determine, do we need to go forward? Can I help this patient? And if we can, we go, okay, next step is we're going to do the quantitative EEG. That means we're going to put a nice little cap on their head. We're going to fill it with some gel. So we are messing up everybody's hair. So some of the ladies don't like it, but we warn them ahead of time. And then after that, we get a nice report. And that report tells us how that brain waves are functioning, how that electrical output created by the brain is working. Is it going way too fast? Is it going way too slow? Is it going just right? And it also tells us what lobes of the brain are involved. Is it frontal lobe? Is it parietal lobe? Is it temporal lobe? Is it the sensory motor strip? So we find out what is happening in the brain and how we need to adjust it or activate it and stimulate it. And then we would start doing therapy. So they would come back in the office, and the therapy for neurofeedback is very simple for the patient. They get to come in, they pick their show on Netflix, or we even have DVDs, and they get to watch a movie. And we put little leads, typically on the forehead. We can do them for the frontal lobe, but we do any lobe in the body, depending on what the patient needs. And they also wear what's called photic stim glasses. These are glasses that have little flashing lights that are created by a frequency of the flashing that's going to activate and stimulate the brain as well. And the beautiful thing is all done by how the brain is responding. Sorry, how the EEG on the forehead is telling the computer how to make those flash. So it's all specific to that patient. That's why there's no side effects. Now, if someone is suffering with seizures, I'm not going to use the glasses because that would be counterintuitive. But for the other every other patient, they all do wonderful with glasses. It's a very powerful component to the neurofeedback. They sit there, they watch the movie. I like TV shows. A lot of my patients, like I said, are elderly, so they love watching Seinfeld. Okay. And Seinfeld was great because it's a good 22 minutes of time. So that's a perfect training cycle for most of these people's needs. And then we just disconnect them. And typically we do this anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week for a period of time, for whatever's the appropriate time length for patients to get the results that we're looking for. After about 20 sessions, we usually do a brain map again, do a follow-up. But most people are doing so great that sometimes they go, no, I don't want to do the prep. So we know we're going down the right course. But if at any time, I tell my patients, if I don't think they're going in the appropriate direction, if we're not getting the gains that we're looking for, sometimes I do a brain map after 5, 6 sessions just because I care to make sure that we're doing the appropriate program. Because there's many different programs and settings we could do on this machine so we stimulate specifically areas at different frequencies and different functions of the brain, different lobes, to get as specific as possible to help that patient get maximum amount of gains.
So what does a session feel like?
It feels like nothing. There's nothing for the patient. They don't feel anything because, like I said, nothing is being put into their body. I mean, they're going to feel the leads with the paste holding it onto their foreheads, but that's about it. They're going to see the flashing lights, and they're going to see, the movie is going to flicker every time they have an abnormal brainwave pattern. And that's how the brain gets retrained through operant conditioning. But there's no physical thing. The first 2 sessions, I usually tell patients, and we do shorter sessions the first 2. We only do about 10, maybe 12 minutes the first 2 because we want to ease into it for the patient. Again, we never want to exceed a patient's metabolic capacity. So they might be a little tired and fatigued because remember, our brain is our most metabolically demanding organ in our body. So if you guys remember taking the SATs or big hard tests or our licensing board tests when we were in school, right? Before we got licensed, it's a lot of stress. And we get sitting there filling out forms, not doing anything active, but we wind up being starving and craving nutrition when we're done because our brain burn so much fuel while we're just sitting there taking a test. So we have to always keep the person fed appropriately. So nutrition plays a key role in that. But the brain, that's why they might be fatigued after the first 2 sessions. Then the body's like, they learn what it's going to do because the nervous system always wants to evolve and get healthy.
So we're going to go over some myths here for the audience. Okay. So myth number 1, neurofeedback can shock the brain.
Totally false. Nothing is being given to the brain. There's no electrical stimulation to the body. Like I said, the leads on the brain or on the head are reading the electrical output created by the brain itself. So the brain is doing the one shocking the machine, if you want to use those words, shocking. So no, there's no shocking going on to the body.
Myth number 2, results vanish as soon as you stop training.
Nope, we hit on that a little bit earlier. Like I said, there's been a research study going on since the late 70s, I believe 77, and they say the results are permanent. And they're using ancient technology, not the powerful stuff that we have today, which is so much better. Computers are a lot better today than they were 1977, 78. So no, most of the results, like I said, are permanent, and patients love it and they just love the gains.
And then the last myth here, which you kind of touch base on as well, is all neurofeedback systems are basically the same.
No, it's just like anything else. I mean, there's a lot of great companies out there that I would use and recommend, but there are some things that you could buy on Amazon that say they're doing neurofeedback, because technically it is biofeedback, but on the nervous system, but it's not going to have the stimulation that we want from a good professional unit. So, back in the day, there used to be some good home units that are really great and powerful, and they work really well, but they're still not as good as a good professional in-office unit. So you use a lot less time on a professional unit than you would on a home unit, and a lot of something that you would buy on Amazon, I just wouldn't recommend for people.
So we'll ask a few questions that the audience have typed up here for us. I'll just pick a few here. I've got one here. Can kids do neurofeedback?
I treat thousands of children with ADD, concussions. A lot of kids I used to treat too. I see a lot of kids who were born addicted to drugs because their mom was doing drugs when they were, pregnant. And, these kids get adopted by angels. These adoptive parents take these kids in and they bring them to see me. I must have had about 15 kids like this. And these kids were so bad. One mom in her testimony to me was, I no longer have to hide the knives. I no longer have holes in my wall because little Johnny's not kicking holes in the wall. He's not taking the knives and throwing them at his sisters. So you get the body working better, especially with young kids. They're just going to go with it because a young child, 5, 6, 7 years old, has a lot more plasticity in their brain than an 88-year-old person. Yeah, neurofeedback is great for children.
Another question here, is there a home-based option? And if there is, when is it appropriate?
Yeah, I have tons of patients who come to me who don't live by me, and they live in other states. So the only real option is to do a home-based system, and they work great. A lot of times they have to do the therapy more often. And what we do is they come to the office once every couple of months for a new brain map to make sure we're going on maintaining the appropriate program for them to get the gains they're looking for. But there's plenty of great home-based options out there that patients will get great gains, but they usually need to work it more often than they would if they were coming to the office.
And then last question here that we'll take is, if I'm on medication, do I have to stop before treatments, or when can I get off of them if I do start treatments?
It all depends on the medication. And it depends on what's going on with the patient. So like I said earlier, some benzos you don't want to be doing neurofeedback with because the benzos are really creating an issue with the patient. So we might want to have them consult with their prescribing physician and wean off those appropriately before we start doing neurofeedback. A lot of other times I might have patients who are on tons of medications for other health ailments. And as we're cleaning up their nutrition, cleaning up their diet, and working in conjunction with neurofeedback, it's not a big issue. The only times they're really concerned is usually with the benzos.
And then any last success stories that you can share? I know you've shared quite a few, but any other ones that stick out that you can share with us?
Yeah, one lady who she was 64 years old when she came to see me the first time. And I just new into doing neurofeedback, and there were 2 ladies in my office, in my consultation room, and one lady looked like she hadn't slept for a week, and I thought she was the patient. So I talked to her and I go, hey, how you doing, Mary? And she goes, I'm not Mary. She's Mary. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. She goes, I'm her friend. I live in California, but I'm here goes, I'm on suicide watch. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, as soon as I fall asleep, she said she's going to kill herself. I said, well, we got to get her to the emergency room or see a psychiatrist or something that's, kind of out of my realm. It's like, we've already tried that. Nobody will see her. The ER won't do anything unless she does do something. And it was a moment like that, why you became a doctor. I felt like, God said, okay, Chris, you got to help this woman. So I did my whole normal thing. We did the exam. We did the quantitative EEG. I'll never forget, this was a Wednesday. And the woman goes, can you help her by Monday? I have to go back by Monday. I'm like, holy mackerel. Well, we did everything we had to do. We started doing therapy. And actually, since it was so early, we started doing 2 sessions a day to help her. And I even came in on Saturday and Sunday. And Monday morning, she came in. She was whistling and humming. She was so relieved. Her friend's like, I feel safe going home now. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this. And the beautiful thing, she finished out care. Her friend from California came, stayed with her. I was able to help her with some other health issues as well. This woman who couldn't understand, was so miserable, who wanted to pass away, finally saw her mom, spoke to her mom, which I hadn't spoken to in about 10 years. She had a relationship back with her sisters again, changing lives. I mean, that's just a very drastic thing from going, I want to be suicidal, I want to kill myself, to now I'm enjoying life. And we talked about the results being permanent. Now, for the most part, they will be, and this is what I tell everybody, unless you have some sort of horrible head trauma. So if you get into a horrible car accident and have massive concussion, that's going to change functions of your brain. Also, if you have a horrible psychological issue, if I watch my family members get murdered or something horrible happening to them, I'm not going to be the same person I was before that. Does that make sense? So therefore, we have to do. So with this one particular lady, she literally called me back up 2 years later saying she wasn't feeling good again. She was starting to get depressed. And I started going, what happened? What changed in your life? Because you were doing fantastic and wonderful. And she goes, I don't know. I mean, I just bought a new house. I love it. I go, what do you mean you bought a new house? What's going on in the house? The first thing that came to my mind is there mold in the house? She goes, I don't think so. We gave her a mold kit. Her bedroom had mold through the roof, even though she couldn't see it. And it was just unbelievable. We cleaned up the mold. We wound up only doing about 4 or 5 sessions with her just to get her back on track after we cleaned up the mold. And she did wonderful and great afterwards. So she had a toxin, a neurotoxin from the mold that was damaging her brain from the exposure of living in the house for about 6 months. Once we solved that issue and just did a couple little tune-ups for her, she did wonderful and great again. And that's the power of, again, your brain, the power of neurofeedback as a very safe and effective therapy, helping people with all sorts of health issues get their body functioning great again.
That's awesome. That's really powerful. Neurofeedback, like I said, we use it in our clinic as well. Yeah, lots of success stories with it, lots of different conditions. But thank you, Dr. Chris, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom there. It making neurofeedback crystal clear and actionable. So for our listeners, if today sparked a question or you want help deciding whether neurofeedback is right for you, check out this episode. Also, you can check out the notes and resources for ways to connect. If you found value here, follow and subscribe the Healing Wellness Show on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and leave us a quick review. That actually does help others find the show and listen to it and get the benefits that you are getting. You can also follow us on the social media for behind-the-scene clips, patient other practical tips that you can apply for this week. For consults and care in our community, reach out to Iowa Wellness Center or Family and Sport Chiropractic. And to learn more about Dr. Chris's work with neurofeedback, visit exceptionallifecenter.com, I believe. Is that correct, Dr.
Yep.
Chris?
Exceptional Life Center.
Exceptionallifecenter.com, and it'll be on the screen. I'm Dr. Karim. Thanks for listening. Take care of your brain, and it will take care of you. Well, we'll see you next time on the Healing Wellness Show.